We're so pleased to have you here, Professor Gagandeep Kang. Welcome to the Infosys Science Foundation office. Professor Kang, we remember you fondly as the Infosys Prize winner, but of course you're also professor at the Wellcome Trust Research Laboratory at the Christian Medical College in Vellore. We're very pleased to have you here with us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Back in 2016, when you won the Infosys Prize, you talked about improving vaccines for Indian children or making vaccines work better for Indian children. What did you mean by that? Doesn't medical science and don't vaccines work the same for everyone?
Sometimes we get lucky, as we are today with SARS-CoV-2, where we have so many fantastic vaccines that are working very, very well. But when you deliver vaccines that are given through the nose or the mouth, then there is a lot of variation in how vaccines perform. And for the vaccines that I've been working with, which are oral vaccines for polio and for rotavirus, it's been a challenge to get them to perform as well in low-income countries as they do in high-income countries. So we've been experimenting a lot, trying to figure out what makes vaccines work so differently in different countries.
So how can India focus then on medical science that is more tailored to its population?
Well, this was one of the first problems that we identified. That was a big problem that the rest of the world wasn't willing to work on. For example, anemia in women in India. We say that somewhere between 40 and 50% of Indian women are anemic. Do we have the right definition for anemia? Because a lot of women seem to function perfectly okay with a hemoglobin level of 10. But a whole host of issues out there, diseases that we have that other people don't, or conditions that affect us more severely and we don't understand why. So looking around us in the medical profession, identifying the problems that are unique to us and then beginning to seriously work on them, I think is what we should be doing and don't do enough of.
In 2016, when you won the prize, we were hearing about how clinical medicine translates into public health. And I think your study also looked at, the rotavirus study also looked at translating from the lab to the field. Could you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Work on the vaccine had started in India in the 1980s with Professor M.K. Bhan at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, identifying a unique strain that was infecting neonates. He took it forward in partnership with US scientists to develop it into a vaccine. But then came the questions that we were working on, which is, will rotavirus work the same way that polio vaccine does? Brilliant in the West and not so good in India. And if a vaccine doesn't work well in India, should we be using it at all? We worked in the lab to try and figure out what immune responses were to the vaccine. We tried to figure out the diversity of viruses that were infecting children in India. We even went as far as to do costing studies to figure out what it meant for families to have a child who was infected with rotavirus, needing to be hospitalized. What we were trying to do is build a comprehensive picture that would inform public health and inform the science of rotavirus.
Did you find a lot of vaccine hesitancy in your program back then? And do you see that changing now?
The vaccine hesitancy we saw in the first place for rotavirus vaccines was among the policymakers who did not want to introduce yet another vaccine into the program. It was convince them by generating all the data that we had generated. And once they came on board, once the vaccine started to be introduced in 2016, the pace of progress was just so much faster than we had anticipated. By the end of 2019, the vaccine was in every state in the country. So countrywide, all children who are born in India today have the opportunity to get the vaccine. And among parents, by and large, There is not vaccine hesitancy for anything that is within a routine program. We are beginning to see vaccine hesitancy that's more in cities than it is in rural areas, because people are reading about vaccines and acquiring the vaccine hesitancy messages that come from the West. If you look in rural areas and at vaccine hesitancy, then that tends to be limited to certain communities and to the information that has been given to community leaders that then influence their communities to not take up vaccines.
When you were elected as a fellow of the Royal Society, you were the first woman scientist from Asia in 350 years of the Royal Society's history to be elected. So that was pretty momentous. What were your reactions?
To me and my work, it really makes no difference. But I think in terms of recognition and people thinking that what I'm doing is worthwhile and being willing to listen, somehow that label does change things. So there have been a lot more people who've asked and then found that this is something that is of great interest to them and to a wider community.
I'm sure a lot of people look up to you as a role model. To those who do, what would you like to say?
The biggest thing is be curious, find the questions, because there's nothing that is as much fun as figuring out answers to questions that you have asked. And if you do it right, you'll be learning all your life, and I can't imagine anything that is better than that.
Thank you so much for being with us today, and I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, Bhavna.